Welcome back to the lab. Right, we're going to do a cam belt kit on a VG30DE powered 1990 Z32 300ZX. There's a lot of numbers and shit, eh? And I just want to look at this Gloria motor and touch base on something on that. This needs covering, I believe. Some people will be like, shut up, stop talking, but I want to get it sorted out. So it was basically with three things that were wrong with this thing when it was on the dyno. It was getting too hot. I kind of knew about that. You look on the lab, you'll see the post about the radiator. I kind of knew that would happen. Wasn't making the boost that it should have been making. But that's always a bit of a guess anyway, right? So you don't necessarily know the exact specs of the engine. It should be a standard engine, according to what we know. The guy that sold it to the current owner, they hadn't put cams in it or anything like that. So maybe his exhaust manifolds that the previous guy built, maybe that they just flow so well that we've ended up with less boost than what we were thinking we should have had. So the pulley that's on there, the one that I made up, that should have been making 8 psi, and we were getting closer maybe to 6, I think, at peak. So that's interesting. I thought the belt was loose, so that was retensioned. It's good now, I believe, and there's no way the front one's too loose, and you didn't hear belts slipping and stuff like that. So that's interesting. So it still doesn't really make the boost that we thought it would make. And one of the possible causes for that was thrown out there was that maybe it looked like the injectors weren't lined up properly in the manifold and in the fuel rail. And I think the words were thrown out there that the O-rings were just about popping out or something to that effect. Probably quite an extreme description of what was going on that maybe didn't line up with reality all that well. So, but anyway, I kind of just said, oh, well, let's tighten up the belt, do that, and we might get some more boost, or it might run better, and just do what you can, adjust these brackets to get the fuel rails to line up better, and then we should be safe to carry on with less finish off the tune, rather than giving up on the tune, towing the car away. It's an hour and a half each way, and spend another hour and a half travelling back another day, and I don't charge out my time during the day while the car's on the dyno, so I lose basically a day's work every time the car goes back, and I wasn't that keen on doing that. So the brackets were, these are the original brackets here, they were modified, so the holes were elongated in the tabs, and the excess material around the outside edge, here's a nicer looking tab, that's what they would have started off like. The excess material that stopped it going any further like that, you imagine it's hitting that recess that you can see there, a little bit shaky, just had bloody, there we go. You can see that it would stop at that point, right? So you cut off some material and then you could carry on, go a little bit further that way. So that was done. The washer that's under the bolt heads was not there anymore. Now, I honestly cannot remember. I could look back through some pictures actually in some of the videos and find out whether it was there or not. But it should have a washer under that bolt head. Going onto that material, it should have that to spread the load. Otherwise, it's too much pressure and it crushes that area under the bolt head as per what you can see there. And that's not good. There's certainly not enough purchase on that tab anymore. No way would I let that go out the door like that. That's not safe. You imagine it wouldn't take much for that material there to wear away or fracture away or whatever, and all of a sudden that fuel rail's loose. So we're talking about potential leaks and all that sort of carry on when there's a good way of causing one right there. So anyway, so I had to make new brackets. You couldn't radius the edges of that and make it look nice because there's no edge distance left on those holes. So that's actually the worst one of the whole lot. That looks pretty gnarly, doesn't it? But that was, I guess, I should just throw these on the ground at this point. I guess they were trying to just get it done as quickly as possible and get on with it, get the tune done. So I've made a tool. Ideally, you would have two of these, and you'd have one at each end of your fuel rail. That's a 14mm diameter stud, I guess you call it, spigot. and you drop that in the hole instead of your injector, and that gives you your alignment of your fuel rail. So backwards and forwards, in and out, 100% sorted. You'd leave, unless you got a V6, I suppose it might be difficult, but you'd leave a couple of O-ring injectors in the middle so that it sets your height correctly, and then one of these on each end, and that gets you your backwards and forwards and in and out taken control of. Now with this in the fuel rail and in the manifold, it positions this fuel rail about 1mm away from that tab. The guys that modified these were saying that they would have liked to have gone further that way, but they were running into this boss here and couldn't go any further. So it just shows that there definitely is the chance that things can look different to what they actually are in reality. So when the tool's used, things can be slightly different to what you think. Due to wanting to have that washer under that bolt head, you have to be in that spot that it is there, because that washer is now in the radius of that bend that's under my finger there. Now, yep, I could have ground off the edge of that washer and shifted the fuel rail that way, just that tiny little bit more. We're currently out of alignment, out of perfect alignment, by 0.88 of a degree. So I don't think that's an issue. If people are going to worry about 0.88 of a degree of misalignment on the injectors, then it's probably time to go back to school and understand how O-rings work and things like that. And that's not a dig at Mr. Tuner, as he would probably say. That's a dig at other people who like to chime in on these things, who think they're smart and probably are lacking a lot of knowledge that they need to make comments. Doesn't seem to stop people though. So the original brackets, the original position, there's a general idea for you. You can see where we're at. At best, we're halfway in between where it started and where it ended up once it was modified. So we're only talking the grand total of movement, 2mm from where it was to where it was shifted to. And then I've had to come back a little wee bit to end up where we are now. So as far as, I don't think there were any issues this way. As far as the alignment this way, realistically there's nothing in it. There's no issue there at all. The other area that may have been causing some of the concern, two of these mount holes here were actually a little bit higher up by about maybe 1.5 mm, maybe 2mm from where it would have been perfect to try and get things really, really good. So, and with these injectors, the style of injector that they are, there's an adapter at the top and there's an adapter at the bottom. That looks like it's sitting up too high and that it could go down lower. It can't. That's as far as it goes into there. That is where that injector lives. The top one, same deal. Looks like that could actually sit down further and should be perhaps touching against that. What are we going to call that? The dick hanging out the side of it there. It's probably a bad word to use, isn't it? Something for people to get upset about. But it's not. That's as far as that goes. That is pressed hard down onto that injector. And same deal here. This adapter is actually pushed hard up into the O-ring. So, fuel rail, sorry. So all these O-rings in this setup, this one right at the very top here, that's about 6mm from there. The one that's on the top of the injector is about 6 or 7mm up into this. The one that's on the bottom of the injector, that is about 6 or 7mm into that adapter. And the one that is on that adapter is about 6 or 7mm into the manifold. And the clearance between the injector and this adapter is actually quite high. It's about 2mm clearance there in diameter. So you can actually, even though things are jammed, not quite jammed, it's probably a poor word to use, but very tight vertically, you can still wriggle that around quite a lot. So if that fuel rail had been sitting slightly higher up, which it probably was based on where I had the holes, that allows more clearance around the top of that. It allows more slop in that top adapter. It allows injectors to sit at a higher angle than what we've got here. I still don't believe there would actually been a problem. I don't think it's an issue at all. And I think some of the statements, a couple of the statements that were made on my Facebook page, my business page, where I earn my money to feed my family, I think a couple of those statements were out of line, for the lack of better terminology. As you can see from the front here, that injector, standing at this angle, looking at that, or certainly in person, I'm not sure how it's going to play out on screen, definitely looks like it's crooked. And it isn't. It's a bit of a trick on the eyes. So, as you can see, there's that pivots around in there quite freely. It's not loaded up any way, shape or form. It's not bound over or jammed up or anything like that. And as I've already mentioned earlier, we're only out of alignment at the top here by... I wish the engine would stop shaking and jiggling the screen around for you. We're only out of alignment here by a grand total of 1 millimeter, or 0.88 of a degree. So, yeah, there we are. Let's have a look at the Z32 and let's move on. The only reason why I'm bringing this up, I just don't want people throwing this back in my face in a few months' time. It happens all the time. People grab little snippets of information from people that have been saying things and not necessarily true. That gets multiplied and it gets thrown back in my face. A few months later, next thing you know, people are saying that a car burnt to the ground because Glenn screwed up the fuel system. And we can't have that. That's rubbish. So, moving along. No, aim for the right switch. Start, you bastard. Nope. Hey! That's better. Never has started easily, this one on E85, but and this fuel's bloody, I don't know, it's got to be 8 or 9 months old now. It's lucky it even runs at all, to be honest. Right, we'll get outside and swap these cars over. Alright, on the machine, up in the air. No thanks to you, you little bitch. But, just run through everything on the car, make sure there's no disasters. Like, we don't want to do a cam belt kit and then look at the car later and go, oh my god, there's a massive hole in the floor from rust and the car's a write-off. Extremely unlikely anyway, but you have a look over the vehicle, make sure there's no other problems that are going to jump up in the job. Oh hey, there's an oil leak. Who's surprised? I'm not. You can actually see all the grit and everything that's built up in here has helped to identify a tiny issue that these panels had when I was making them. The NA runs a different sway bar than the TT. TT ones, they bolt up and they're absolutely fine. NA ones, they just touch on the sway bar. As you can see, it's just rubbing just here. And the fix for that was to put them in the English wheel and just give them a little, tiny little power bulge just across that whole area. This one's obviously escaped that program. Yeah. After 11 years, oil leak? Yeah, no surprise. 300 ZX. All that time. Lots and lots of leaks. So, I'll give this all a big birthday. I'm going to have to get my hands on a whole heap of degreaser, etc. Love that. That makes a big mess. Something else I've spotted while I'm in here. First thing I'm doing is the alternator belt. Oh, hard to drive the camera. Can you guys see that there's a rib missing off that belt? I don't know. I'm trying to shift the light around so you might see it. It's supposed to be a 4-rib belt. It's just got 3 ribs on it. One's gone. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to look into that situation, see what the deal is there. This is an aftermarket pulley on the crank here. Maybe it's not being machined properly. Maybe there's some sort of misalignment going on, but you can definitely see on the alternator. Well, I can, you might not be able to. 3 of those ribs are nice and clean, and the 4th is dirty because it ain't doing anything. Oh, you can see it on the crank pulley as well, actually. So that's an odd one. Not struck that before. Have to, sorry, I'm filming bits of hose for you guys. Have to figure out what's happening there. Oh no, it's an AMS pulley. The Americans don't like those guys because they're from Canada and they get stuff made in Taiwan. And the Americans ran a pretty fierce hate campaign against them over the years on the 300ZX forums. So, oh well, we'll see what's going on here. Right, red cap off. Check our fluid level. Make sure we don't have an issue there. When you get to the finish of the job and you're checking all your work and you see that the fluid's low, you don't want to be thinking, well, you see you might have had a leak. You don't want to be thinking, oh, is there a leak somewhere that was there before or something that I've created? So another classic 300ZX trick. Ta-da! If your old Z32's overheating, it's a no-brainer really. Pull the radiator out, get rid of the bird's nests, etc. out of your air conditioning condenser and your radiator. Radiators are actually cheap on these. They're only like, I don't know what the retail is, I shouldn't say, what the $300 to $400, somewhere around there for a brand spanking new radiator for an NA or a TT. If you're having trouble with your car, it's actually a good place to start. And ensuring it's bled up correctly. We'll get to that later on. So when you get to the point that you're trying to take your underdrive pulley off, I can hold that a bit closer now. If it's the type that does not have the bolt holes in it so that you can put a puller on it, pays not to get rough and just put the old pry bar. Here's a pry bar. Don't just jam it in there and go nuts and try and rip it off. It's an aluminium pulley. It's on a steel crankshaft. Any leaks or anything like that in the engine bay tend to propagate excuse me, in that area. You will have corrosion in between the two of them, good chance. You get all big boy with your pry bars and try and lever it off, good chance you're just going to break something instead. A little bit of heat, aluminium expands more than the metal will, gives you more clearance, and that should just pop straight off once it's hot enough anyway. And you can have a drink while it's doing that. Impossible to do that with holding the camera and using two pry bars, but there you go, there's our corrosion I was talking about, and that's it on the crankshaft. So that's off and nothing's destroyed, no brokenness, no yucky. Funny that, eh? Right, let's get the rest of that stuff off. So at this point, if I was getting carried away with the editing of my videos, I'd put in that sound effect that it makes when the record skips across, you know, the old record player, and so bypass hoses. I didn't order any new fittings for those, and that's not in the best shape at all. So I'm gonna see if I can track down a couple of those really quickly, see if there's some in the country or something like that. More heat. Crank cam belt drive gear. I'm not going to say 9 times out of 10, but a lot of the time that is seized pretty hard onto the crankshaft. Again, corrosion, although not so much dissimilar metal corrosion, it's just generally just rust. And you're supposed to put a pry bar in behind that and lever off the oil pump housing. And I can tell you for a fact that some of them are so seized on there, you're going to blow your oil pump housing trying to get that off there before it'll let loose. So again, bit of heat, give it a go, see what happens. Most of the time they're going to be seized, but then you're going to end up drilling a hole along its axes under one of the drive teeth and the trough. I'm trying to think of words that people are going to understand. At the bottom, in between teeth, so the teeth go like this and they come down and they go back up. If you drill a hole down here, through the gear, not drilling into the oil pump of course, and you get a cold chisel in between teeth, give a whack, crack the gear, and then it comes off. So I'm going to see if I can put enough heat on this one and get this one off. It hasn't been on there 30 years like some of them, or 20 years or whatever. Probably put it on with mths. I'm not going to tell you I remember what I did 11 years ago, but I probably did that. So we'll see with a little bit of heat where it comes off or not. Running the risk here. One-handed jobby. Oh! Woohoo! There we go. Oh, don't stuff that washer. I don't know if we've got a new one. I'm not sure if you can see the smoke there. You should be able to see that. It's pretty hot. Don't muck around with it. If you're going to heat it, you heat it as good as you can. That's going to come off there now. It's a bit hard to do one-handed, as you would expect. We're past the keyway. She's off there, no problems at all. Look, I'll replace the gear anyway, because we've got one, and the factory recommends that you do replace it at 100,000 Ks. So that'll do. Yay! That could have been a lot harder. Alright, so the biggest problem so far that I've seen is those bypass tubes, bypass hose tubes, fittings, whatever you want to call them. These two things here. And there's our mess mostly cleaned up. It's not like eat your dinner off it clean, but it's reasonable and fair given the job that's going on. And it's, well, I mean, sometimes it goes in shows, but it's not really a show car. And once it's all back together, 100% assembled, I'll give it a little bit more of a clean to make sure it's looking good in the assembled state. Taking all the silicone off, all those flange areas, water pump, thermostat housing, bypass housing, etc. Just about to pop those seals out, replace those seals, and we start cleaning up covers and popping all that back together. Right, I got a bit carried away and forgot to film the next couple of little steps. The important bit, the one that you actually wanted to see, so never mind. New belt is in there with all the new water pump and all the bits and pieces in behind there, and new seals, etc, 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 and got that far. So I had a look at this pulley. I can't actually see anything significantly wrong with that pulley. If it's the original belt that I put on there like 11 years ago, it's done 75,000 Ks. So, excuse the mess everywhere. Where is it? It's on the bench over here. So, 75,000 Ks. There's one of the other ones looking a little bit worse for wear as well. I don't know. It could be that it just died. Just had enough. I don't even know what brand it is. I usually use reasonable brands. Oh no, look. Maybe not so much a good brand, maybe. Maybe made in Japan. It should have been a good brand. Never mind. I'll see if I've got one on the wall. If not, we'll get 3 new belts for them, and we'll carry on. Haven't done anything with these yet. I can't focus. There's a close-up of what we're dealing with. It's not too bad, eh? A little bit of a clean-up. Probably be alright. Probably be okay. Biggest issue is the cadmium plating's disappeared off them. So there's no corrosion protection anymore. And they are likely to just carry on fizzing away. Don't look awful on the inside. In fact, the inside looks very good. Compared to what you normally see on these, they are normally pitted, and I've seen them to the point where they've actually just got holes right through them and stuffed. All the bits that have been replaced sitting there, and I think I've given myself some smoko. Not a bad effort so far. It usually takes a day to do this job. I've been mucking around filming some stuff for you guys, and I went into town and had a yarn, so never mind. Alright, so cam belt job complete. I haven't done the spark plugs or the oil change just yet. We'll get it warm before we do the oil change. Probably should have done the spark plugs first, but never mind, it didn't. So bleeding up the cooling system. Interesting little stumble there. If you don't lift up the front of the car a reasonable height off the ground when trying to bleed up the cooling system on a 300 ZX, a Z32, you're going to fail. Period. Like, no argument. It will happen. You will get airlocks. The only other way to do it requires multiple attempts, basically getting it up to temp and letting it cool down, bleeding it up, getting it up to temp, letting it cool down, bleeding it up again. lift up the front of the car, park it on a steep driveway, whatever you can, get the front of it a reasonable height in the air. Like this is, you know, this is chest, well, stomach height for me at the moment at the front bumper, so we're, whatever that distance is there, 2 feet off the ground. That's how you get all the air bubbles to come up the front to the bleed screw. Pretty important to use that bleed screw as well, rather than using the radiator cap. See the height difference there. That's why the factory put it there. Yep, that's all I have to say on that. So if you're still watching, cheers for that. The Z32 is still here. There'll be oil draining out of it. I've got to watch where I stand, or I'll stand in the, I'll stand back here a little bit, stand in the drips. So JB will come pick this up tomorrow, take it away, give it a birthday, a bit of a clean up and all that sort of carry on. We've got a, well, they're just there, you'll be able to see them if I drive the camera carefully. Got a genuine OEM mud flat kit for it. They're pretty hard to come by these days. There's even a spare one there. One of them, left or the right rear one, not sure, it's got a little bit of a tear in it. So there's a spare one. It's got a little bit of a tear as well, but in a different spot. So you'll be able to pick and choose which one he wants to use, but certainly better than some of the fiberglass rip-offs that were available through various places. I think some of them came from Aussie or something like that. But anyway, that's been sitting on the shelf for a long time. He's been waiting for this job to be done for ages, and I apologise for that. Right, so actually not sure what I'm going to be doing next. I think we definitely have to go and pick up the Gloria and bring that back. I'll update you guys on that. I think I mentioned it on Facebook, what's happening with that. I'll update the video stuff later on, show you what's happening there, and we'll just get on with things. Right, cheers, bye.